Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hillary Topper, and this is We Are Endurance webinar series. I am so excited to have Jodie Robertson with us. Jodie is a professional triathlete, and I think you even started around the same time as me, right?
Yeah, I think we
When we
did.
first
Yeah,
met.
for sure. Back in like 2015 or so is when I
Yeah,
started.
it was about
Yeah.
2015 when I started as well. So it's just such a pleasure seeing you, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience and getting some takeaways from you.
Awesome.
So, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you even got into triathlons?
Yeah, so I like my sporting background was I grew up running. I ran throughout high school and in college. I went to college for music, so running was kind of just like the extra thing that I did that I enjoyed doing. Ultimately, though, I just kept getting injured while I was running, so I that's how what brought me to triathlon was just wanting to like force myself to incorporate more cross training into my program and not do such high run mileage. So that's ultimately what I signed up for a triathlon, basically to make myself not get injured anymore while I was running. Yeah, and I do believe that I'm a much like healthier athlete with the more well-rounded approach that triathlon offers, as opposed to just being like a single sport athlete for sure.
So tell us how you got into it. You started in 2015. You were running a little bit. I mean, were you running professionally at that point, or did you take a break and then, because of your injuries?
Yeah, so I basically, when I started in 2015, I didn't know how to swim it or anything. It was like the summer of 2014, actually. And I was like, I'm gonna sign up for, I was injured, so I was riding just like a road bike around town, like with people, like nothing like formal or any like, I was just like loping around kind of thing. And I was like, I'm gonna sign up for Ironman Lake Placid in 2015. And 2014 was the summer that they had like these like massive thunderstorms, and I think they like people like got had to like get out of the lake in the middle of the swim. And normally Placid fills up right away. So I was like, oh, I jumped on the opportunity that it was like still open, and I signed up for Lake Placid, and I like didn't know how to swim or anything like that. But I was like, well, at least I'll keep like learn how to swim, and I'll keep riding for like instead of just running. But I still had like pretty high like running goals. I wanted to qualify for the 2016 Olympic trials, which I had been to the Olympic trials for the marathon in 2012. So I wanted to qualify again for the 2016. So I quickly signed up for like a marathon in the fall, like in October of 2014. And I like cut my run mileage in half and started just riding and swimming, but like all just aerobic, kind of just learning how to do the two sports a bit and really focusing on my running still. And then I ran a marathon in 2014 in October and got my Olympic trials qualifier. And then in 2015, I was still pretty focused on like wanting to do well in running as well as like starting to dabble in triathlon. And I ran the LA Marathon, which was the US National Championships in 2015 and placed fourth there. So and like with another like trials qualifier time. So I was like pretty like happy about that considering I was running way less than I'd ever been running and swimming and biking. And then after that I did some other like races that were closer to home running wise and was focusing. I had two 70.3s that I was doing in June. I was doing Quasi 70.3 and Syracuse 70.3. So I kind of started focusing a bit more on learning, making sure I could get through that 70.3 distance. And yeah, those are the first two triathlons I ever did in 2015. I raced those two, and then I was planning on racing Placid that summer, but 2 weeks out I actually got hit by a car while I was riding my bike on like one of my last like 4 hour ride or whatever. And yeah, I broke my clavicle in three pieces, and then that was it. So I never raced Ironman Lake Placid in that summer. And then from there, after I got hit by a car, I was like, I really want to do this like triathlon thing and like really invest in it. So I looked into coaches that I wanted to work with that were working with some other pros and started working with somebody in that fall. And in the beginning of 2016, and actually in the fall, really, we made a choice that like if I was going to become like a top level like pro triathlete, I really had to put a lot more time and energy into like the swimming and the biking to get them up to par. So I actually I in the beginning had set out with that focus of wanting to go back to the 2016 marathon trials, but I opted out of not going in 2016 so that I could get my swimming and biking up to where they needed to like compete as a pro. So yeah, it's kind of those couple
So,
years in a
so
nutshell.
let's take a step back. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's 2015. You've been a runner, you got injured, whatever. You sign up for a 70.3 first before you
And
do the Ironman, which you ended up not doing. But 70.3, what was like, what were you thinking in terms of, oh, I'm not going to do a sprint, I'm not going to do an Olympic, I'm just going to go for it.
I think in my brain, I was like, I love the marathon, so I loved long stuff and like running long had always been like my niche kind of per se. And like 5Ks were 5Ks to me and they weren't as rewarding to me. So I think that's kind of, I just had that draw towards the longer distances right away. And like doing a sprint or like an Olympic, I don't even think ever crossed my mind. I just wanted to go like right to Ironman.
Talk to us a little bit about nutrition. I mean, did you always focus on that as a runner prior to, or was it after that you became a triathlete that you started delving into, really looking at what you're eating and drinking to make yourself a better athlete, better performance?
Yeah, I think I always was focused on like eating healthy. Like we always like loved cooking at home and like buying fresh food and like really like making fresh things at home. I'd say like the training side of nutrition was definitely opened up to me a lot more in the world of triathlon as opposed to in running. Like I mean, you're never really out there for more than like 2 hours at a pop when you're running. So you essentially can like throw a few gels on you and like life is good. And you have a water stop planned along the way and you're like golden. So, um, yeah, so I think it wasn't until I got into triathlon that I was like, oh, what's sport drink? And I got into the more like using nutrition for fueling while you're training because you're out there so much longer.
So just tell us what you're doing to go long. Like, what are you using? Are you using Martin? Are you
Yeah.
using whatever?
Yeah, I use a product at the moment. I'm still figuring it out. Like I think it's always figuring it out. And as I get older, I mean, I am 38 years old and I'm going to be 39. So I'm not like 25 years old. And I didn't start in the sport until I was 30. And I even feel from 30 to now, like my body's totally changed. And like, I mean, just over the years, I can see like my ability to tolerate different products. And I'm sure products have changed as well, especially with supply demands and things. I think that products are changing and we may not even realize what's being sourced in them is changing. So and I think our bodies react differently to that, especially if you eat like a really clean diet outside of your training. I feel like it almost becomes like a trickier balance of finding like something that your body can tolerate during training, right? But I'm currently using a product called Fast Food, and it's kind of like a Morton kind of thing. There's no like fructose in it. I've gotten away from fructose because I was having some stomach issues, I believe, with that. But I still haven't 100% like cleared up my stomach issues. So that's still something we're delving into. Like we're going to do like a sweat test with a company called Levelin and a couple of other things just to see if we can get that like a bit more under the wraps. But generally speaking, like for like a long training day or an Ironman, I look at the number of like carbs and the amount of sodium. And so I basically try to dial in like 80 grams of carbs an hour and 800 milligrams of sodium. So for me, those are like my numbers. And most of the products I use are a 25 and 200, so 25 grams of carbs and 200 milligrams of sodium per like a serving. So I can pretty much tell that out pretty quick in like my brain while I'm training and have a good idea of like where I'm at, and know I need to get approximately like 3 servings per an hour, whether that's through sport drink, through gels, through blocks, through gummies, like whatever you choose, like that's kind of, and I do try to train a lot with like what I'm going to use out on course because I want to know that, like, especially because I've had a lot of stomach issues, I want to know that like I can manage it during training to be able to manage it during a race as well.
Did you figure out how much you actually needed, and maybe that
Yeah,
would be helpful
so
to the people on the call and people listening.
my coach definitely did a lot more of the figuring out than I did. I would say like everybody, it's definitely like a little bit independent, but I think you can do. I don't exactly know. I can look back and see if I have them and like email it to you as well. I probably have a formula somewhere that I don't even know what it is. One, because I feel like once you figure it out for yourself, you kind of like know like that's your game and like that's what you're doing. I know people who go, like, generally speaking, I know people who go as low as 60 and then people will go up to like 100, so I feel like that range is probably where most people are gonna lie, is like the 60 to 100 kind of, and whatever your body can tolerate and what you teach it to tolerate essentially. But I've heard a lot and listened to a lot of podcasts about basically like once you go above that like 90 to 100, like there's no way you're using it and processing it. So even if you teach your body to like process that amount of carbs, you're still not able to use that amount of carbs in that time. So like what's the point then if you're not using it? But yeah, so there's definitely a lot. I mean, I just listen to a lot of podcasts and like try to gain as much knowledge as I can around like that. And then I think ultimately it's really what works for you. It's just experimenting because everyone's bodies are different and trying things out.
Absolutely. So tell us, congratulations on your recent win. Can
Thanks.
you talk a little bit about that course and also how you got through it? Like, what are you thinking? What's your mindset when things get difficult? Like, what do so I'd love to hear about that. And then I'm
Yeah,
going to open
so
it up to everybody.
awesome. Yeah, so I recently raced Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, and it was a bit of a last minute decision. I was actually supposed to rate Mont Tremblant 70.3, but I never received my passport. I had applied for my passport renewal months before, and yeah, still never received it. So Ironman was fortunate enough they swapped my entry over to the full at Coeur d'Alene because it was on the same day. Yeah, so basically like 9 days out, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go do an Ironman instead of a half. But it worked out, so I'm not complaining. The course is great. I mean, if you ever, don't think they're racing the full there next year, but I know they have the 70.3, and I would like highly recommend like the town, the race, like it was wonderful. It felt like I was doing like an event power, like race awesome, like backyard race, but I was doing like an Ironman branded like Ironman, so it had this like great like small town feel. I mean, from like the person who rented me like the Airbnb that I just paid for my Airbnb on there, she was like out on the course like cheering me on, and then like and the next day was like, oh, I'm gonna, you have to go to this hot and cold plunge place, and like sent me off to this like hot and cold plunge recovery. I mean, this is just like the people that were there, and like everywhere whenever I was like running on the course, people were just like cheering for you like crazy. So, and I was like, I don't know anybody out here. This is what I felt like I was in my backyard. So it was really like a special place just for the feel of the town. And like it has that small town feel, but it's a lot bigger. Like if you've ever been to Lake Placid or something like that, and like it feels very like tight, congested, like everyone's in this like small location, or small town. Things are like a lot more spread out. So it doesn't feel as like tight and congested, so, and then course, like, so the community there is like really wonderful, like great place, and the course was beautiful. Lake Swim is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's almost always like a wetsuit swim there. So if you like wetsuit swimming, it's a place that I think you could almost be guaranteed a wetsuit swim. And then yeah, the bike course is like has climbing in it, but no like super steep climbs. It was definitely like more gradual, kind of like enjoyable, beautiful climbing. And then the run course was great as well. Like kind of goes out along the lake and just a beautiful venue. So definitely recommend that one. And then as far as like mindset, like before I go to the race, I do like a pretty detailed race plan from everything from like what the weather is going to look like on the day to like exactly like what my goals are in this swim, from like some specific goals to some like goals like drive from the hips or like like technique like pointed goals as well. But in each of like the segments of the race for the swim, the bike, and the run, I always leave myself with like two words that are kind of going to be my focus for that. So I feel like those words are really important. Just gives you something to fall back on like in the middle of the race when things are your mind needs a refocus, right? I just have like two words and nothing like too crazy. So, and just having that really detailed race plan. And I mean, I write out like all my nutrition, like I write out my transitions, like exactly what I'm going to do in transition, what things go in transition. And then, like, I mean, and I write out my nutrition with like all the details of like how I'm carrying everything, if I'm marking bottles, where it's getting stored. And then, like, the day before, when you're trying to like pack up your bags and be like, do I have everything? It's like, time off your brain because you just like open up your book and you're like, oh, I just need to pack up this. So it's kind of like, oh, I already did that, you already like put in like the mental energy and like especially those few days before when everything's so hectic and crazy, like just having something to refocus you. And I don't do it like too far out in advance because I feel like if I do it too far out, then you can kind of like become like a little crazy over that race plan, like this is like the be all end all kind of thing. I also put like what my mental focus is going to be. I have like a page that's like, what's like my reward like after, like what's like, what am I gaining from this? Am I like looking for a Kona slot? Am I looking to just finish the race? Am I going for a burger with my family? Like, what are my husband and I going to do the next day? Like those kinds of things to like be like, oh, just get to that finish line because you're going to have the best burger tonight with your family, like so. Yeah, just like planning out all those details. And I probably do it about like probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So not hugely like 5 days before the race or something. And then I get hand it to my coach and we kind of like, he looks over it and just like might refocus like a couple things. Like I think before I went into Coeur d'Alene, I had like certain power numbers written down for the bike. And he was like, well, with the climbing and the descending, like I think you're actually gonna have to ride like a little higher than that. Like your range can go up a little bit from, and I was like, oh, okay, that's fine, and like the higher limit could be a little higher. And like just gives me a few corrections about that sort of thing. And then yeah, then each night I just kind of like read through that whole race plan and like so it's like in my brain, but for 5 nights only, not for like 2 months before. Otherwise, it's like too all consuming.
That's
So yeah,
great.
that's just some of my pre-race planning.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. How did you come up with that idea? I mean, was that just something that like you worked out with a coach or, was
Yeah,
it something that you've always done?
I've worked with basically with like two coaches and both of them have had like the specifics. The one I'm with now is even like more specific, like the nutrition component, like the reward component, like everything that he had, like he added a lot of those other things, and yeah, so they've always been like guided by like a coach, but I think it's like pretty easy to like
Figure it
create
out.
one on your own, based upon like what drives you, right? And just writing out all those details. Like in the past, before this year, I had like never written out the details about like what nutrition I was taking, and it was just like all in my brain, and it would be like the day before the Ironman, and I'd be like, oh, like how many gels do I need? Like, did I put enough gels on my bike? Did I put enough stuff in T2? Like, I just like, but like when I got to Coeur d'Alene, and I flew out to Coeur d'Alene, like I worked because I work as a teacher. I teach elementary band, and I worked like all day Thursday, and then like flew out Thursday after work on like a 6 p.m. flight to like the West Coast, you know? So then you're like getting to the West Coast and it's like you get to your Airbnb at like 1 a.m., like West Coast time, and you're like, oh, it's like 4 a.m. and I've now been up for 24 hours. This is amazing, you know? And I think like, you know, just having that stuff done, I was so grateful. It was like one thing I didn't have to think about or stress about before the race. And yeah, so
Thank you. That's
yeah,
great. I'm going to open this up because I'm hogging up the time over here. So
yeah, no worries.
anybody have questions?
Sure. I'm really intrigued that, you're a teacher, which is, a very consuming job in itself. And you still find time to train as a professional. That's pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, I think it just comes, I have a lot of support. Like my husband's great and like super supportive. And especially when like it's coming before a race and you're like those couple weeks before and you're like, oh my God, you've got to make dinner every night. Like I'm not doing that this week, you know? So I think like having a team and like, and in the past, I probably didn't like delve off some of that stuff either, you know? Like I was like, well, that's like my chore, you know, at home. Like I better complete my chores at home, you know? So,
Mhm.
but just having like a unit that like knows like, okay, like this is like the big goal that I've been like training for. Like, can you share some of my help? Like, you help me out a little bit and like just asking for that help. And I think you'd be surprised like how like easily that's given, knowing how hard and like how many hours you put into like preparing. Like they're part of your preparation and they're invested in it just as much as you are. So for me it's just been like being able to like ask my husband for that help and like not feeling like guilt about it, right? And knowing that he wants to help. A lot of times maybe like your family just doesn't know like what they can do to help, right? So delving off some of those simple things. Yeah, but I mean, I think it just comes to like having like a really good routine, like on the day to day, you know, and communicating. Like if you work with a coach, like communicating. Like one of the things I did with my coach was like before we even started working together, I like it was like and he like had sent it to me, and it was basically like a week schedule, and like every hour like on the schedule was like labeled, and then like you just shaded in like I can't do workouts from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Like that's out of the question, you know? So, and then I'm only getting up at X time in the morning. So these are your options in the morning. Like I have morning band rehearsals like Tuesday, Friday. Like don't put it, I can't swim in the morning on Tuesday, Friday. No pool opens up early enough for me to get to before I have to get to work on a Tuesday or Friday. So like if you want me to swim, I can swim, but it's gonna be in the afternoon. Like, so I think communicating those things and like being realistic about your time. Like, there have been times in the past where I've been like, yes, I can do that 3 hour ride after work. It's like, no, like, you're gonna be like smoked by the end of the week. And like, you might do that 3 hour ride, but then like 2 days later, you're gonna be like, I can't do anything else, you know? So I think it's just being realistic about your time. Like, prioritizing like I need my sleep and like these are the blocks of time, and like laying it out like on a piece of paper can be super helpful. And just and communicate if you work with a coach, if you like coach yourself, like I mean I think it helps if you're coaching yourself too, because we want to get it in, right? And it's we just have to deal with the time we have, you know, and knowing like, oh, I can get a big block of time on the weekend. And like some people are like, no, like I'm doing X on such day and I can't, you know. So yeah, I think that communication piece and like just being realistic with yourself and a coach about what time you do have available.
Okay, just one follow-up question. Do
Yeah.
your students know that you're a professional triathlete, and how does
Yeah,
that
they
affect
do.
them?
So last year I raced in Kona, and it was the first year that I did anything like really extensive with the kids, and it was a total blast. It was so much more rewarding to go there. Like so we played bingo, like school-wide bingo with everybody, and the bingo basically taught them like all about what triathlon was and what I was doing and what I was racing. And then when I got out to Kona, we did like a live Google Meet, and I like showed them all my race gear and like all that kind of stuff, like when I was in Hawaii. And then I think, and it was on a Thursday last year too. So it was kind of cool because teachers like pulled up like the live, not that I was on live coverage, but whatever. Somebody was, and I was out there. So they like pulled up the live coverage and were like, yeah, she's like actually out there doing this. And then when I came back, we like followed it up with, I did like goal setting sessions with each of the grade levels, because it's definitely like age specific, right? But we did like goal setting sessions about like how I set my goals and like process goals and outcome goals and like different things like that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the kids like, it gave me a connection with the kids too, because like they could be like, I'm swimming at like the Junior Olympic swim meet this weekend, and the like I had the girl who was like going to like this national like ice skating competition, and she's like, I'm gonna miss the concert. And I'm like, it's okay, like both things, like you can do both, it's all right. Like I'm not gonna like shun you because you're missing one concert in your life, like it's okay. So I think they see, I think it like goes both ways, for like it like inspires them, but it also inspires me too. So
That's great. Thanks.
yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
I found it interesting. You switched from a half to a full rather late, and you did well in the full, but very well. Does that have you rethink any of your training load, or is it that you're just in such a good a shape you can jump to the distance?
We knew I was planning on racing Ironman Lake Placid, so which was another 4 weeks later. So I kind of had some like Ironman workouts in there. We didn't really have like an Ironman specific block yet, right? But I did have like a long ride weekly, and I did have like a double run day weekly. So I had some things that definitely like in my mind I knew were geared towards preparing me for Ironman, whether like was I in my sharpest Ironman shape that I could have been in? Probably not, but I wasn't in a bad place either, I didn't think. And then I'd raced an Ironman in April, and like Ironman's kind of my comfort zone, if that makes any sense. Like it's like my happy place where I'm like confident I can execute, right? Space, because like it's what I enjoy and what I love. Whereas like the switch to a shorter like the switch to a shorter race, for example, I just raced at the PTO US Open in Milwaukee, and like that to me was an absolutely like daunting experience, because it was something I felt zero preparation for. Like I got a wild card spot like 2 weeks out, and I was like, yes, this is such a great opportunity. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't even know how to dive off a pontoon. That's amazing. And I have to do it twice. Like this stinks, to like, I have to make a 180 degree turns on my bike. Like you don't do that in Ironman, So like, there were just like a lot of skills, let's say, that I was not familiar with. So to me, like, going down to that distance, it was very daunting, right? Just because it's not your comfort zone. But
thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you came from a running background and you didn't know how to swim. So I'm wondering, how did you get into the swim and get yourself up to 70.3 ready?
Yeah, so like I could swim, like I could get myself from one side to the pool, but like anyone, like basically the lifeguard was like, are you gonna drown or are you gonna make it? Or like, it was like legit, like, so I definitely just like asked, I got help. Like I started working with Danielle Sullivan, who people probably, I don't know if are familiar with, but that's how, like Hillary, we met with.
Well, I know her, but
Yeah.
I don't think anybody.
Okay. Yeah. So I started working with like just a local like coach, which was like in person, one-on-one, and that in-person help was like definitely like vital, I think, in the beginning to like learning some skill, like basic swim skills, right? And then I think with swimming, the biggest thing for me has always been to find like one thing to focus on. There are so many things that could be fixed in swimming. It's like 1,000, like, you could fix your hand position, you could fix your kick, you could fix your hips, you could fix this, you could fix your head, you could fix your way you breathe, like But I think it's knowing like the one thing to fix and like at the time to fix it, and just fixing like, okay, like the biggest problem I have is like my feet are sinking, right? Or the biggest problem I have is my head position. And just like dedicating months to that one practice of like every time I get in the pool, I'm going to make sure that one thing is correct. Because you can't fix it all at once. It's just, it's too much, like it's too much of an overload, right? It's just not physically possible, I don't think, or like mentally possible, right? And it's still for me, like I'm still fixing one thing at a time. And hopefully, like once you ingrain that thing, then you can move on to the next. So that would be, and like time on task. I mean, the pool is hard. It's hard to get to a pool. It's time consuming. Like an hour swim takes like 2 hours by the time you drive there and you get in the locker room and you swim and you shower and you get out of the locker room. I mean, I'm a member of like 3 pools. Like it's just the reality of working full time and knowing like the convenience trumps all for me. Like I need to be able to like make it work with like the life schedule and like getting someplace. Get there without being it like too far away. Like so that you can swim more often, which is always helpful. I don't know if that helps a little.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can say it's a lot of work, as you said before, to be both full-time teacher and a pro triathlete. So your motivation, I mean, there's some money in being a pro triathlete, but not a lot. So is it just how is it worth it to you to have such a busy schedule like that? And you know, why do you do it all?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. There were times in my life where I was like, I just want to be a pro triathlete. And then I was like, it's just, I really actually don't enjoy like only training. When I was running in 2012, I took a year leave actually from my job to just train and like train as a professional. And I like hated it. I didn't like the pressure that came with it. I didn't like the fact that like I wasn't contributing to the household like I wanted to. I mean like I I enjoyed my job, that I wasn't teaching and I wasn't teaching anymore, and it just like lacked this enjoyment for me. So and then I think once I got into triathlon, I thought again, like, oh, I'm gonna make this like my profession. And I quickly realized, like, no, like I actually love my job. Like I really enjoy my job and I really enjoy triathlon. And the pressure that comes with like making your like profession, it's just not for me. And I think like it takes like I admire the people that can do it. And yeah, of course, like I wish that I had that ability, but like mentally, emotionally, that lifestyle is not one that is important to me. But like the desire to get the most out of myself is really high on my list. And like I still want to be like one of the best in the world. Like I still want to try to finish top 10 in Kona. Like I mean, will I be missing like could I be better if I like didn't have a full-time job and just did professional triathlon? I honestly don't think so, because I think the mental and emotional stress would be so high that physically I wouldn't be performing as well either. And I think it took a long time for me to come to that like conclusion. That's a kind of like a reality check, like but yeah, so it works for me. I like the busy lifestyle. Yeah. I don't know if that helps a little.
Yeah. Well, way back when, I didn't know if I wanted to be an engineer or a musician. And the advice I got back then was be an engineer for lifestyle and comfort, but definitely keep being being in music for fun. But
yeah,
don't try to, well, let's say don't try to make it a profession. But it sounds like you're almost the opposite. You're doing music for fun, but you're getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But you're a teacher. just
Yeah,
different.
so it's different than like
Yeah.
that performing aspect. Yeah, I think it'd be the same thing if I tried to perform in music. Like I had a performance degree in college and I'm like, I'm good, thanks.
What's your instrument?
Flute's my primary instrument.
Flute.
So,
Great.
yeah.
Very cool. I have a question, Jody. So who are you using now for coaching?
I currently work with David Tilbury Davis. He's based in Finland. He's British and based in Finland. So yeah, I just kind of got connected with him through some other professional triathletes. Like earlier this year, I'd worked with the same coach for a really long time, and we both had just kind of gotten a little bit complacent in like what we were doing, you know. And I mean, I had such a bad race in Texas earlier in the year at Ironman Texas earlier in the year, and I think it was like the reality check I needed to be like, you got to change something if you're going to continue to make progress here. And it was like I my coach wasn't really reading my workouts anymore, but I wasn't even really doing what he wrote in the workouts. You know, it was like it was on both of us. It wasn't only on him or only on me. It's just like a relationship we were.
I wanted to ask you about, I think your breakout race was Texas 2016. Were you there?
Yeah, I was in Texas too. That was my first Ironman. Yes.
Right. I was there. And I remember, I think I went up to you and said hello and congratulations because I think you did really well there, did you?
That's awesome. Yeah, I came in second that year. So yeah.
Right. Okay. I think you were already back home, took a shower, and were having a beer. I think, when the storm hit, I was on the run course. So
Yeah, it was that the year that there was like all this crazy hail?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that was crazy.
You know, a lot of people who might be watching this may ask you, what was your favorite Ironman and why?
Yeah, I think to me, like my favorite Ironmans are definitely like I think the community really makes like an Ironman special. Like I love Ironman Lake Placid, but I wouldn't say like that the community really embraces Ironman Lake Placid, right? For example. But I still love Placid because I love the course and it's like a hometown race for me. But then you go someplace like Mont Tremblant or like Coeur d'Alene, and the community just like loves having you there. And like, what a great vibe, you know, from those towns that they like are thrilled to like support the athletes and welcome them. And even Texas, like, I mean, I'm in Texas in the Woodlands. The people there have always been fabulous. And I like, to be honest, I go back because I love the people and I love the community. It's not one of my favorite race courses. It's a it's pretty congested, you know, like with the way the race is set up and like I mean, but the community is wonderful. So I think it's really the people are in that like supporting community that make a race like yes, go back there or not. And that's what I found, especially in Coeur d'Alene. People were like, oh, who had done it were like, I want to go back and race in Coeur d'Alene again. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, like whatever, you know, but I can see why totally.
So you said that Lake Placid is kind of like a home course for you?
Yeah, I mean, we live on Long Island, so it's like a 5-hour drive. It's like one of the few it's the closest driving Ironman that there is, I would say.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were originally from up there.
No, we did though. We lived in Albany for a year, and then we also went to school up at SUNY Potsdam, Crane School of Music, which is actually just north of there. So I feel like we're pretty familiar with the area. We spent a lot of time there, like especially when we were in college, and like it was the first Ironman like I knew about, and like all the like everyone from Long Island when they were going to race an Ironman was going to race like Lake Placid. So I think like it was definitely like has that hometown feel for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you doing Ironman Jones Beach?
I am not. There's no pro field, and I think I could still register like and just participate. Like I don't think you'd count for like awards or anything, like if you were a pro, but which is with the timing with Kona being only 3 weeks later, it didn't really make sense, like in the training. Like I didn't really see a benefit from it from a training perspective to like race hard 3 weeks out sort of thing. So yeah, we'll be out there supporting and cheering and
Cool. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Janine.
Okay. How, how, how important is it for you to try to go to Kona? Just curious.
yeah, it's definitely a special place, and it's a place that has brought me a lot of joy and a place that's brought a lot of disappointment for sure. A place I have not figured out. And yeah, I mean, in the beginning of my career, I feel like it was really, really like the be all end all, and I went in 2016, 2017, and 2018, all 3 years. But like it was like crushingly disappointing when I didn't do well there, all 3 years. It was just like the biggest letdown ever. And then like 2019, I didn't even qualify in 2019. And I think it was just like me having to like let go of like that being like the be all end all. And it's like truly a special place that I love the opportunity to compete in. And I mean, you want to race the best in the world at the distance that's your favorite, right? And like I like Kona is like the world championships is the place to race the best in the world at that distance. So I think that's what drives me there the most is like I want to see where I stack up against like the top 50 Ironman women athletes in the world. But I think like I went back in like then 19 I didn't qualify, and then 2020 was 2020, and then 2021 was actually the year that it was in St. George, but I didn't race an Ironman during that time period, so I hadn't qualified for that either. And then 2022 was my first year back there last year after like a pretty long hiatus. And I was like, no matter what, like you're not gonna like shed a tear at the end of this race. Like, not that I wasn't like emotionally invested or that I didn't really want to do well, but I was like, you're gonna just give it your best, and like such is life, but like enjoy your family after and enjoy the place and enjoy the opportunity. Like, I mean, I left that island like angry for 3 years, So I think my goal was definitely like to give my best, obviously, like drain the tank on race day, but like not leave like bitter about it no matter what happens. So I think I successfully accomplished that task, and I will once again do the same this year. So like
Great.
but it's a fine balance, like being really emotionally invested into a race, like where you want to like leave your soul out on that race course, and then like also like being able to leave your soul out on that race course but knowing it also doesn't define you, right? So I think that's like hopefully something I've grown into over the years.
Talk to us about negative self-talk. I mean, I'm sure you have it. Everybody has it. How do you push it out of your head?
Yeah, I think like that's where like part of like having like that race plan like before you get to a race, and having like writing a page of like what you're going to focus on mentally, right? Like writing down in each section, like giving yourself like process goals, like during the run I'm going to run tall and quiet, like like things you can do under any circumstance, right? Like you can't control the weather, but you can control like grab a drink at every aid station, you can control like those kinds of things. So I think it's like having a few like key like mental words, whether it's like no you can, or like trust yourself, or like be patient, like whatever those mental cues are, but combining them with like some really solid process goals that you can accomplish whether things are going south or things are going amazing. Like you can still accomplish those process goals while you're out there, like take care of yourself at every aid station, like that's a given, like you've got to do that, and like you just focus on that, and hopefully by refocusing your energy into something positive or something controllable, right, will kind of pull you out of that funk a little bit. Not easier said than done.
Also about coaching, right?
Yeah.
So you said that you went through a couple of different coaches through the years. what do you look for when you're hiring a coach? Like, what's the most important thing that when you are going out and looking for somebody to hire?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I really, at this point in my career, I really wanted like a collaboration with somebody, right? Someone I could communicate well with, someone I could collaborate with, someone where like who was going to listen to like a bit of my needs and I could have a bit of a say. Like I don't want the ownership of it. I don't want to write the workouts. I don't want to make those decisions. I'm happy to trust somebody else. I mean, you have to trust the person and you have to buy into like what they're doing 110%. If you don't, like, it's not going to be successful for either of you. So, like, having someone you trust and you believe, like, even if you're like, I've never done this before, like in May and June when I started working with my new coach David, we did all these like VO2 max like in workouts, like, and I was riding like 1 minute like balls to the walls like as hard as I could, and I'm like, oh my god. And like the workouts were like 40 times a minute on and like 30 seconds off, but and it was like, you won't make 40 though, so just like go as many as you can until you can't do it anymore at like X watts, you know. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never done anything like that in my life, you know, but I just like trusted the process and like trusted it was something new, like a new stimulus for my body. Like, let's just embrace it, right? So I think really trusting the process, even if it's like uncomfortable or different. And then having really good communication, knowing like why you're doing it. Well, like, why am I doing that like top end stuff? You know, like we're just like trying to like push up your threshold a little bit higher. And like that's the way you're going to do it is by going hard, going out of your comfort zone, you know, like forced me to get my cadence up higher. Like, so there were like lots of things that like I couldn't ride X watts with like the cadence that I was riding. I had to ride like a way higher cadence. So I think there's certain benefits that you may not even see, but having someone who can communicate those benefits to you, like helps you buy into that process more. Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned to me at some point that you were using QT2, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what was the difference between them?
Yeah, I mean, when I was with QT2, it was a lot of like aerobic kind of like middle of the ground stuff, and there wasn't as much like high end, low end, you know, kind of thing. So I think like the training has just changed, like to have different high end, different low end. Not that we don't do the middle too, but there's just like a little bit more variety in the training. And I feel like the QT2 had like one set like periodization like plan of like how it went, you know, and like you did this and then you did this and then you did this and you did this. Whereas with like David, I feel like he's got like 20 different blocks of training, let's say, and it's like, well, which one do you need right now? And like there's not necessarily like a periodization. It's like which kind of training and which block of training is going to be like most beneficial for you and like your scenario with where you're at. So yeah, so definitely like a different approach like all around for sure.
Yeah. Any other questions before we wrap this up?
And I'll just say too that like I don't think that either approach is like wrong per se. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that if I had gone to David like earlier in my career, right, and not known myself as an athlete as well within the sport of triathlon, I think that this type of training may not have worked for me as well, right? Whereas when I went into like a more like set concrete system that was just like A, B, C, D, like it worked really well for like me being a new athlete like into the sport. So I think the coaching too evolves where you're at in the sport as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying too. Well, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
My
was
apologies
so
for my internet
informative.
snafu.
I'm sorry?
My apologies for the internet snafu. Oh,
No worries.
I
We'll
appreciate
cut
your
that
patience.
part out. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.